president of COIN, Cassie Smedley, and former Wisconsin congressman and co-host of The Bottom Line on Fox Business, Sean Duffy. We begin with the race for the White House. With less than 50 days until Election Day, thousands packed Nassau Coliseum in Blue State, New York last night, excited to see former President Trump speak at his first rally since the second assassination attempt.
Wow. This is a big crowd. I'm thrilled to be back in the state I love with thousands of proud, patriotic New Yorkers who are really the heart and soul of America. We know that. And the reason I'm here is because it hasn't been done in many decades. It hasn't been done for a long time, but we are going to win New York. And that's the first time in many, many years that a Republican can honestly say it, and we're going to do it. Americans deserve a campaign based on the issues. We try and keep it on the issues. And God has now spared my life. It must have been. God, thank you. Not once, but twice. And there are those that say he did it because Trump is going to turn the state around. He's going to turn this country around. He's going to make America great again. These encounters with death have not broken my will. They have really given me a much bigger and stronger mission. They've only hardened my resolve to use my time on earth to make America great again for all Americans, to put America first. And so I say to the people of New York, with crime at record levels, with terrorists and criminals pouring in, and with inflation eating your hearts out, vote for Donald Trump. What the hell do you have to lose? What do you have to lose?
Quite a question there. This comes as new Fox News polls show the presidential race essentially locked in a dead heat. Harris has a 2-point lead over Trump nationally. Now that's well within the margin of error. But Trump is ahead 2 points in battleground counties and states. And voters say they prefer Trump on 2 issues, the economy and immigration. Okay, I want to start here, Cassie, with what you see when voters are asked, did the policies of Trump and Biden help or the economy and immigration? Okay, I want to start here, Cassie, with what you see when voters are asked, did the policies of Trump and Biden help or hurt you? And I want to pull up the net numbers. That means the difference between help and hurt. And you see it's -24 with Biden, say that the Biden-era policies hurt them. And you see +17 say the Trump-era policies help them. That's quite a differential. So for Kamala Harris, she needs to get away from the Biden.
I believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago. Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
What are 1 or 2 specific things you have in mind for that?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
I grew up a middle-class kid.
She can't do it.
Yeah, she's very good at staying on script. It's a very artfully scripted dodge because she knows the answer. The answer is no. The American people have very good memories. And if you don't have a good memory, you have a bank account. And you know what that looks like now versus 3 years ago. You know what your 401k looks like now versus 3 years ago. And that's why you see, despite the national polls head-to-head on the issues, there's been no change because they're not getting answers. And they know that the answers they are getting don't match what they're feeling. And there's a lot of opportunity for Donald Trump here to really capitalize on that. And I love when he says, what do you have to lose? Well, what we have to lose is what we've been feeling the last 3 years. And we can't have 4 more years of that.
Emily, and for lack of a better word, and I'll use an acronym here, rather an abbreviation, what I learned from this Fox poll is Americans have a very good BS detector because when they are asked, is Kamala Harris willing to say anything, they say 55% see her as willing to say anything to get elected, 48% say the same about Trump.
Ooh, well, remember, we've seen that for years, right? Frankly, decades behind.
5% see her as willing to say anything to get elected, 48% say the same about Trump.
Ooh, well, remember, we've seen that for years, right? Frankly, decades behind Kamala Harris. We saw that when she was running for Senate, for AG, even for DA, right? When she's the best chameleon possible and it's polished, she's good at memorizing lines to your point. But when it comes to policy, the fact that she cannot even point at or articulate why she's been flip-flopping, it shows that there's just sort of this vacuous space within. But if you go back, think about what you stood for. We've talked before about what theses we wrote in law school. We can articulate now the points that we used and why we felt that way. We can also articulate why we don't feel that way anymore. This is someone who has been on the public dole for decades, who looked to us to ensure that we kept her in these places representing us as the highest prosecutor of the president said, well, it doesn't matter what the law says, I'm just going to let migrants vote. This is someone who over and over again has pushed her values over the law, and that's what they want to actually represent the country as commander-in-chief, someone that would absolutely flout the laws of the Constitution or constitutionality of the votes of the American people, because want to actually represent the country as commander-in-chief, someone that would absolutely flout the laws of the Constitution or constitutionality of the votes of the American people, because...
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting new questions in this poll I'd not seen in any poll ever conducted this election, one of which was, what is going to motivate you to go to the polls? And look at the issues that are going to motivate people. This is enthusiasm, get out the vote, high prices, and immigration are the top two. 2 issues Trump has massive leads on.
Right, I was going to make that point. So again, the 2 issues that motivate voters are 2 of the top issues that Donald Trump performs on, right? And so I think it's also interesting in the polling. Again, Kamala Harris has made up some ground in the last 6 weeks, but it still shows that with black voters, Donald Trump's getting 29%. 4 years ago, he was at like 12%, right? So that's a huge gain, and it matters in places like Detroit and in Georgia. But then Hispanic voters are at 46%, and he got 35, 34% in the last election. Nevada, Arizona. So this is, I mean, completely shaking up the ground in which we're playing politics. And I love that he's going, not just to do the rally last night in New York, he went to Bodegas, and he's going to the Bronx, and he's actually making plays for places that Republicans don't play. And that matters because a lot of people think in New York their votes don't matter, right? Donald Trump's never going to win here, so why do I vote? When you actually say, actually, your votes do matter, and we can win this state, that's an energizer, right? That's going to turn votes out for him. And he may not win, but what he may do is make Kamala Harris spend money and play in the state where she never would have had he not done the work here.
Well, and I would add to that it also brings the country together.
Yeah.
And almost by default. I mean, I don't even know if he's meaning to do it on this issue, but when you identify people in New York and Springfield, Ohio, and other places who are having similar economic and illegal immigration type challenges, pressure on the resources in those areas where you've had people come in who perhaps won't ever be vetted in this country, we'll never know who they are. But when you see those pressures come in and you feel them all over the country, suddenly there's a unified idea that, well, we're all under pressure now. And maybe that cuts across party lines. Maybe that's why he is currently doing better with independents than she is doing. But you'd have to be able to articulate the path. And I appreciate so much what Emily says. Fine, if you want to get to where Trump is now, then she is doing. But you'd have to be able to articulate the path. And I appreciate so much what Emily says. Fine, if you want to get to where Trump is now, if you want to borrow that no taxes on tips, of course he's furthered that. There are a whole lot of people aren't going to have to pay taxes. You know, the ideas are being kicked around. Well, would it be military for certain, injured people, whatever it is? If you get to that point with borrowing, maybe you ought to explain why suddenly you look more like a Republican at this moment. I mean, forget about the fact that she's flip-flopping. People in her own party ought to be questioning, well, why does she not exactly keep her word on reparations? Oh, they're going to study it, which means they'll never get to it. And so her just dropping the word, the words we're studying reparations isn't enough. She owes it to her own party's voters to come clean on, well, why are you flip-flopping? Why are you changing?
Cassie, we just have a few moments here, but you and I worked together at the Republican National Committee for the lead up to 2020, 2 of those years. And I wanted to see what you made of the fact that Biden's numbers were so much better than Kamala Harris's. I went back to our Fox News poll, first week of September. Last cycle, here's what you see. Biden had a 5-point lead. That is more than double Kamala Harris. What do you make of that?
That is interesting because Biden was, so much worse on the issues. But I think you're recalling back how people actually feel about Kamala Harris. Remember when even Democrats were like, I don't know how we don't swap her in for Biden or swap Biden out with her. We can't get over the optics if we don't choose her. But gosh, we really don't want her because she's worse than Biden. Her policies are worse. Her inability to connect with people is worse. And so despite everybody's effort to have this hope and joy campaign, again, why you're not seeing those changes in the polls on the issues is because people remember, to your point, Emily, Kamala Harris's record and that she has been a pretty abysmal vice president, having done nothing on anything that she's been tasked. And if I can just say one point really quick, Sean, you were kind of getting there on the down ballot races. Maybe Trump does that. He's spending time here and ramping up those folks is so important and hopefully enticing for people to get out to the polls too.
And that's why I went to red state Montana to try to unseat John Tester and win back the Senate.
Yes.
All right, well, coming up, federal authorities say Iran stole information from Trump's campaign and sent it to the Democrats. A live report on that.
FBI is now releasing new details of Iran's effort to cause chaos in the 2024 election. The FBI saying Iran stole non-public material from the Trump campaign and sent it to people associated with the Biden-Harris campaign. Jillian Turner is live at the State Department with more on this developing story. Jillian.
Hi, Harris. Well, the Iranian regime, it turns out, is upping their attacks on the U.S. presidential election in a very big way. U.S. intelligence says, as you mentioned, that over the summer, Iran hacked into the Trump campaign, stole information from it, and then tried to share that information with what was then the Harris-Biden campaign. Take a listen. We're just getting comment now from the Harris-Walz campaign. They tell us, quote, we're not aware of any material being sent directly to the campaign. A few individuals were targeted on their personal emails with what looks like a spam or phishing attempt. But former President Trump actually said this last night. Listen.
Them all of the materials because Biden is working with Iran, and Iran doesn't exactly like me because they were ready to make a deal. Iran hacked into my campaign. I don't know what the hell they found. I'd like to find out. Couldn't have been too exciting. But they gave it to the Biden campaign.
Well, the FBI now says that Iran is also desperately trying to leak stolen Trump documents to the American public through media outlets. Microsoft put it this way in a recent hearing on foreign election interference. Listen.
Every day we know that there is a presidential race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But this
in a recent hearing on foreign election interference. Listen.
Every day we know that there is a presidential race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But this has also become an election of Iran versus Trump and Russia versus Harris.
Well, the FBI says there is no evidence Harris staffers responded to any of the stolen emails that they received. The campaign says that's because they have a, quote, robust cybersecurity measure in place. The Secretary of State says this is all about something that's much bigger than even just one campaign. Listen.
When state or non-state actors spread disinformation, material deliberately meant to deceive or divide our public, they attack the very foundations of our free and open society.
Well, Harris, the Secretary is right in the sense that Iran has been at this for a long time now, as much as 10 years.
Secretary Blinken is wrong when he says that this would be any kind of disinformation. That's absolutely incorrect. They stole things that were non-public items that were... Secretary Blinken is wrong when he says that this would be any kind of disinformation. That's absolutely incorrect. They stole things that were non-public items that were factual, and that's why the former president wants to know, well, what did they take? So is he right? Is Trump right when he says that they don't know yet what was stolen? And why wouldn't they know if that's the case? Do you know?
We don't know. So the FBI is leading the investigation now, Harris. We don't know if the FBI knows precisely what was stolen or not. That's up to the Harris team to disclose to them. So we don't know yet, but as soon as we can get more information on that, I'll, of course, let you know.
Wait a minute. So Biden, I just want to make sure I've got the facts right, because they don't sound fair. So the Biden-Harris campaign can decide whether or not the FBI can see what was stolen, and the Biden-Harris campaign can then decide whether or not Donald Trump a competitor in a presidential election who the material was regarding and stolen from can actually see what was taken.
Well, so in some instances, the FBI can just wholesale, demand that information be turned over and actually get it themselves. Other instances, they have to ask the owners of the information to provide it to them. We don't know exactly which
Can we
instance
ask on their
this
behalf?
is. We absolutely can.
Yeah,
That's a great question.
yeah. Okay, Jillian, great reporting. Thanks for taking us been stolen. You see where I'm going with that, right? the candidate, this is a presidential election. He's got to know what Iran has. Like, I think that's really important. And he also deserves to know what the Biden-Harris campaign has. So I don't understand. So the FBI has to demand it? Well, I think we can get it too.
So that's the key point, right? So of course Donald Trump wants to know what information of mine do the Democrats have and how are they going to use it. You can prepare your defense if you know what offense they can use on the stolen material. But I think this is even bigger. Look at Iran. And again, of course they want Kamala Harris to win. It's Democrats. John Kerry, who did the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, allowing them to get closer to nuclear weapons. They gave them billions of dollars back. Donald Trump put sanctions on their oil, which is their main revenue driver in the country, and they had no cash. The problem now is that there is sanctions, but Joe Biden hasn't enforced. Donald Trump put sanctions on their oil, which is their main revenue driver in the country, and they had no cash. The problem now is that there is sanctions, but Joe Biden hasn't enforced them. So if you look at the two parties, the two actors, the two candidates, of course they don't want Donald Trump. They would love Kamala Harris because Democrats have gone easy on Iran.
Emily.
Had pictures taken of her and her private photos taken. Think about the outrage and the horror when there are break-ins and people steal your proprietary information. And had pictures taken of her and her private photos taken. Think about the outrage and the horror when there are break-ins and people steal your proprietary information. And number two takeaway, the Harris-Walz response should have been, we are cooperating fully with the FBI. We will absolutely give everything over. We wish our fellow candidate the best. Number two takeaway, the Harris-Walz response should have been, we are cooperating fully with the FBI. We will absolutely give everything over. We wish our fellow candidate the best. Speaks for itself.
Wow. Well, Putin endorsed her. So she's got part of that China,
exactly.
Iran, Russia, triangle if you want to.
Yeah. Speaks for itself.
Wow. Well, Putin endorsed her. So she's got part
Exactly.
of that China, Iran, Russia, triangle if you want to.
Yeah. Harris, there was a joint statement that went out from the FBI to other federal government agencies. I could not believe what it said. It says, this malicious cyber activity is the latest example of Iran's multi-pronged approach to sow discord. Is Iran sowing discord or trying to make sure Trump doesn't win? The statement goes on. Russia, Iran, China are trying by some measure to exacerbate decisions in U.S. society. Are they exacerbating decisions or trying to ensure that Trump didn't win? What do these names have in common? That all got Secret Service protection because Iran was threatening them. John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Mark Esper, Kenneth McKenzie, Brian Hook. They were all Trump administration officials. Iran is targeting Trump, former administration officials. And where's the intel community to call it out? You guys were happy to call Trump a Russian troll, crossfire hurricane. He's a Russian asset during 2016. Where are you now to call balls and strikes? Iran is trying to make sure Trump does not win.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yeah, all strong points around the couch. From a campaign perspective, we're honest about what's happening, what we've done to correct it. And that's where the campaign really needs to step up right now. Otherwise, a lot more questions are going to be asked, and that's a big problem for everyone.
So just real quickly, I'm just getting it from what you're saying. That's where the campaign needs to step up. I'm saying the federal government does too.
Yeah.
Because she's part of both.
That's right. Yes.
So, you can't apply the Hatch Act here. She's got to go do her job now. She's the president of the Senate as the vice president. Can't we, they love to call hearings. They can't get one on this?
Yep.
The federal government's offended because they're the only ones who can influence American elections. They're the CIA, the FBI,
They're offended.
Justice. Not Iran, just the U.S.
Fox News polling shows Donald Trump crushing Kamala Harris on one issue that could decide the presidential election.
Has become a top concern for voters this election cycle. Now, new Fox polling shows that different visions for how to get the job done. Here's Harris's.
We must also reform our broken immigration system and protect our dreamers and understand we can do both, create an earned pathway to citizenship and ensure our border is secure. They have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation in American history. Our border is secure. They have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation in American history. Imagine what that would look like and what that would be. How's that going to happen? Massive raids? Massive detention camps? What are they talking about?
Here's President Trump.
Funny, my people say, sir, it doesn't help you to speak about the border. Nobody cares. I said, I want to speak about the border. I did a great job. Sir, nobody cares. It's true. I talk about the border. Nobody cared. But now they care because now the border is 25 times worse than it was in 2016. Now the border is not even believable what's happening. And I want to be known as your border president. I'm going to be known as your border president. And Kamala will be known as your invasion president.
He's not wrong, Kaylee. The reason it is the top issue is because it has ballooned under the current administration, and their vision for fixing it, believe me, will not.
Ballooned is the right word. There's a chart, and it's in the New York Times, and what you see is Trump monthly apprehensions, Obama monthly apprehensions, and then you see Biden-Harris. And right around the 58,000 mark, you see Obama, you see Trump, you see little spikes up to 100,000, and then you see a huge directional shift upwards to 250,000 monthly apprehensions, and that is Biden-Harris. So no wonder Axios earlier in the year reported that immigration was a hot potato issue in the administration. No one wanted to touch it. Deputies were being sent to cabinet-level meetings because nobody wanted to own it. That included Kamala Harris. So now she says, I'm for this bipartisan legislation, except there's a new Axios piece that shows all the progressives say she won't really bring up that legislation. It's just a talking point to win. And by the way, Kamala,
Obama has fired her because he was the deporter-in-chief. That was his nickname. In fact, at one point, for that year of his presidency, he led any other presidency for deporting people that we've seen in decades. So she does know what it looks like. She does know how to do it. I think she was a prosecutor presidency for deporting people that we've seen in decades. So she does know what it looks like. She does know how to do it. I think she was a prosecutor at that time. Perhaps she was at that point Attorney General of California in a state that has a wall structure that goes into the ocean south of San Diego. So she knows immigration. She knows what deportations look like. She knows what mass deportations look like because Obama was successful at it. So I'm confused about this issue. Is he no longer talking to her, or is she just incapable of repeating what he says?
Well, 10-point variation, Sean. That speaks for itself.
And by the way, this is not just a Republican issue. You see people in Chicago and in New York and cities across the country who care about this issue because their lives have been impacted. And by the way, it's not the rich elites who live behind gated communities that are dealing with this problem. It's the everyday mom and dads in neighborhoods across the country that are seeing the violence and crime increase in their neighborhoods. Kamala Harris said in the clip that we played that we can secure the border. Well, really, Kamala, for the mass deportations? She's not going to deport anybody. And I think Americans see how she's engaged on this issue, and they don't like it. Again, you have terrorists, you have smugglers, you have drug dealers, you have human traffickers all coming across the border. It begs the question, what kind of vetting have you done? If you want to open up the border, why are you letting all these bad people into my country and ruining my community?
Right, where the vice presidential candidate is from in Minnesota, that's where 25% of all ISIS recruits live.
Wow.
The point is, you go to where you are welcomed.
And you make a good point about, Minnesota, that's a couple thousand.
Harris's team is betting she and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, can avoid many tough interviews and yet still win as they run down the clock to Election Day. Combined, Harris and Walz have done just 14 interviews. That's compared to 55 done by Trump and Vance. Neither she nor Walz have held a single news conference. And together, the Harris-Walz ticket is on pace to do fewer interviews and news conferences than any other major presidential pairing in modern U.S. history. And the hot take of the day, the week, the month, perhaps the year, Sean Duffy just came in from CNN's newly hired Brian Stelter.
Ooh.
Kamala Harris is doing more press interviews if you look closely. I only had a chance to peruse it. He counts podcasts, he counts friendly radio, and he even talks about social media.
Okay, so the job of the staffers around Kamala and Tim is to protect them, right? To not put them into places that they're going to fail, which is why you don't see her doing a press conference, why you don't see her doing tough interviews with really good journalists. And again, if you're the media, you're like, listen, Kamala, don't mess this up. Take a back seat. We in the left-wing media, we're going to take this for you. We got it. We're going to message for you. We're going to defend you. We're going to attack Trump for you. We're going to do everything that you and your campaign should do. We're going to do it for you. But just remember, she was polling less than Joe Biden, who was polling at the worst of any modern-day president. And they've taken her from, 31% approval and made her a top contender for the presidency. It shows you the power of what this media can do.
You set it up perfectly when you mentioned Biden, because there was this line that stood out to me in Axios that made me realize she's running not the basement strategy, but the Biden basement on steroids strategy. Harris, Biden also limited his interviews during the pandemic in 2020 and defeated Trump. He participated in more interviews than Harris has over the same time period, including a town hall.
Yeah, well, I mean, he also has 50 years of experience as a politician, so he's learned how to fake it till he makes it. I don't know if she's got that gear, and she's certainly not showing us anything about improvement. But I have a different question. We were talking about this off camera. Where is the transparency around, okay, so we don't get interviews with her as a candidate. I do think the country needs to know what she's doing as vice president. Where is her staff? Where are the people who work around her every day? We know she's had a kind of a revolving door report. I mean, Axios at one point had 22 people on record talking about it. Where is her staff? Where are the people who work around her every day? We know she's had a kind of a revolving door report. I mean, Axios at one point had 22 people on record talking about it. But I think we need to know. A current president was sidelined off the top of the ticket because of deficiencies. So that would mean more would fall to her shoulders. So if you don't want to talk to us as a campaign candidate, please talk to us as the vice president and tell us what you're doing and how you're going to make life better between now and November. I think the country deserves that.
We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I have. We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I have.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree. It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree.
Look, you make such a great point. Give me receipts. I am paying your salary, so show me what you're doing on a daily basis. We know that the president himself has a ridiculous schedule. He enjoys 2 weeks of vacation at a time while Americans' lives are in danger abroad. The list goes on, and so the notion that she doesn't have the time to do pressers, which she belies the fact that she's absolutely horrible off the cuff, she better be doing something for this country then. And on that point too, I think that perfectly illustrates your point, which is that she's been propped up, belies the fact that she's absolutely horrible off the cuff, she better be doing something for this country then. And on that point too, I think that perfectly illustrates your point, which is that she's been propped up her entire life. You see her when she even gets slightly pressed or simply just asked a question that is maybe rooted in substance, she bristles. She becomes combative. Well, I haven't been to Europe either. Instead of, so here's my plan for that. She's not a seasoned politician. She still has that hair trigger and that hubris that has defined all of her decisions about marketing and media. Remember getting mad at Vogue if they put her in sneakers on the cover.
Well, who wore the sneakers?
She did. So you're right. She needs to own it. And at the end of the day, too, the fact that her running mate says, I want you to go at the grocery store and have hard political conversations with people there. No, sir. It's just you two. We want to have those hard political conversations.
That's a good point. I mean, I think she's put in an Emmy Award-winning performance, but I don't think she's put in a performance worthy of winning the presidency. Because to your point, she has this moment to be on the job every day and show the American people how she is in a leadership position. And she is neglecting that. She's going out on the campaign trail, and President Biden seems to just get a daily brief, and then he goes off and, like I think today he's doing something with the Hispanic caucus or goes to the beach. Yeah. So who is running the country? And that's a big question. And Kamala Harris is not rising to the moment. And that's what's very frustrating for the voters. And she's got, by the way, the media is the best PR machine. As a former comm staffer for Congressman Sean Duffy, I only wish I could have been that good,
Yeah.
Oh, you were.
That doesn't run the country. No.
Yeah, and you mentioned Emmy performance. Maybe Hollywood will give her one. That is not out of the realm of possibility.
Oh.
All right, former President Donald Trump stopped by late night and surprised the Gutfeld audience and nothing.
Oi, gente, tudo bem com vocês? Então, gente, hoje é sexta-feira, dia 24 de agosto, hoje é aniversário do Rafa. E a gente vai fazer o bolo aqui em casa amanhã, no sábado, né, dia 25 de agosto. Mas, né, eu não poderia deixar esse dia passar em branco. Hoje eu vou fazer a minha rotina rapidinho na parte da manhã. E à tarde a gente vai sair pra comemorar. E ele tá super animado com o aniversário. Eu acho que só criança que fica animada por ficar mais velha, né, gente? Porque eu agora, depois dos 30, cada ano que vai passando, graças a Deus, né, com muita saúde, mas aí você vai pensando, né, daqui a pouco, aí vai 33, 34. Só criança mesmo pra ficar feliz, né? Então eu vou gravar aqui um pouquinho do nosso dia pra vocês e também vou emendar esse vídeo com o sábado, que amanhã é o dia da festinha. Então eu vou começar a fazer a minha rotina rapidinho e eu tenho que limpar o quarto dele, porque eu ainda não limpei essa semana. E como vai vir visita amanhã, tem que estar tudo limpinho. Então, com voz de criança Caminha, como que ela fica, ó. Presta atenção. Eita, gata sem vergonha. Eu vou, pelo amor de Deus do céu. E toda vez que eu falo assim com ela, gente, ela fica